Welcome to today's session. My name is Emily Sprenger, and I am a graduate learning specialist in the Academic Training Academy. We are thrilled to be able to partner with members of our IRB office and absolutely grateful for their expertise in all things IRB related. Specifically tonight, we will be discussing the pre-application process steps, the application process, and application specifics. So a couple of housekeeping items before I turn this over to Dr. Chad Becker. We absolutely welcome conversation in the chat, and we actually do have a couple of our IRB office members here this evening. They'll be handling any of your questions in the chat as time goes on. Dr. Kelly Tribble and Dr. Brianne Mongen is also here as well. So if you happen to see those names answering questions in the chat, know that they are representatives from our IRB office. I am going to pass this right on over to Dr. Chad Becker.
Well, thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone for our IRB webinar regarding the application, essentially. So as Emily introduced it, I have a description here that should help gain a sense of what our presentation will be about today. You can see that there's a few elements. We want to give you a sense of what's happening before, during, and after applying. We have a lot of questions that come in about this, and we'll be talking about other resources that are available to help you with this, but I want to give a presentation about some of the really key components. I'd like you to meet our staff. As Emily has introduced, I'm Chad Becker. I'm an IRB education analyst. We have Kelly Tribble here today, who's going to be kind of monitoring the chat for really good, useful questions. I'm going to try to stop throughout the session and answer questions. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. And we have, of course, Emily Sprenger, who has introduced our session today as graduate learning specialist. As Emily has noted, we also have our director, IRB director here today, Dr. Brianne Mongen, and she's going to help us out as needed. I believe we also have our IRB chair here today, Joe Marin, Dr. Joe Marin, and I'd just like to give a welcome to him as well. So we have some interesting things to talk about today, and I want to just kind of review a few things, give you a visual, and also help you consider this PowerPoint that's available to you on our IRB website as sort of a live document that you can link from. So we have the recorded webinar in the GSSE website that Emily had already mentioned. We also have it on our IRB page. So our IRB webinars webpage within our larger site. And it's also going to be hosted on our IRB YouTube channel. So please feel free to utilize this resource over and over again, especially the PowerPoint presentation that you can link from. So it's almost like a guide. You'll see that several things are linked. I'm just going to kind of hover over a few of them so you can see that these are live links that you could click on as you download and view this PowerPoint presentation. We also have those question and answers that we had discussed. We're going to do our best to answer questions throughout the session, but we also will follow up with written answers to every question that is asked in the chat. And those, I believe, are emailed by Emily to all registrants, attendees, registrants. And then we'll also host this on our webinars webpage. We want you to have access to this information however it is for you. So if you have to leave early, we understand. You can catch up by following these websites here. All right, so very briefly, if you've been to our previous webinar, you'll know some of this basic information, but the IRB in general is in the interest of human subjects protection, and that charge comes from the federal government. So we have linked here the common rule, which is the euphemism that's been given to the code that we follow. If you're interested in reading about that further, you can link here. What isn't an IRB? So we will not provide guidance about your program, things that your academic advisor or your professors or chair might be able to help you with, nor the academic components of your study, nor the methodological aspects of your research, unless And it's usually the methodological ones that sometimes bump up against what we do, which is to protect human subjects. So if your method is to study how afraid people are of axes by throwing axes at them, we're probably going to, have a problem with the method that you've chosen to do that. Obviously being a little facetious, but sometimes people do enter into a risky situation by what it is they plan to do with participants. So we ask that you utilize the correct resource as you work through your research study, whether you're in a class as a master's student, whether you're a dissertation student, staff, faculty, administrators, anyone doing research. Just a few key bits of information about the IRB. We have our resources available to all NU community members at any time. That would be undergraduate students, graduate students, staff, faculty, administrators. We have student principal investigators who can utilize the IRB resources and services at any point in their program. This is one of those common questions we get. When can I start to utilize IRB resources? And it's whenever you want to, essentially. We have some restrictions about when you can actually apply to us, but we do want you to consider using the vast resources that we have when you feel ready to do so. You don't have to wait till the quote unquote class that might have an IRB connection in your program. Dissertation student PIs need not be enrolled in that course, and many of you will recognize these numbers. So feel free to utilize our services at any point. Here's a preview of our webinar. Just want to give you an agenda of what we're going to discuss today. A quick tour, a couple of slides of our resources and services so that you know what's available through the IRB to help you construct your application, complete your application, and then anything that might come after as well. We have some steps that we're going to talk about prior to application that's important to prepare. We're going to discuss the process and starting your application. These kind of overlap, so I have a few slides that'll help you understand the overall process and where you can begin your application. We also have a few specifics about the application platform itself, which is called Cayuse, and you'll see that word a few more times in my presentation. And then what can you expect after application? A lot of questions about, well, how long is it going to take? What do I have to do? When can I begin my research? Those kinds of questions we'll talk about as well. So that question and answer then will come later as well, but we want to stop now and again to allow for pertinent questions to the topic. My hope is to end a few minutes early to also have a general question and answer. I will encourage you to type your questions into the chat again. That way, even if we don't get to them in the session, we have them for following up with written answers. All right, almost done with the introductory information. Here's a tour of our resources. I'm not going to click on each of these links, but as you can see, we have links for all different kinds of things, including learning about what's required to do research here at NU, how to prepare some of the information that you need to show us for your application. We also have some links to information that you can spend hours looking through, including written and video components. We even have a social media YouTube channel and some newsletters. So please do explore these links as you begin and work through your time with the IRB. Our services, so what we can actively help you with that isn't as static as our resources, are things like group sessions, where you can come and receive oral written feedback about your specific work. So please do consider exploring how to engage us in small group settings about topics like eligibility, recruitment, consent, and the application. So while I'm giving a presentation that overlaps a little bit with our group session, our weekly group session about the application, there is detailed information in that session that you won't receive here. So if you're at that point where you want to learn a little bit more about the application, this session will provide deeper detail. We also have office hours. And again, these are regularly occurring weekly and self-schedulable. So please do come to our website, follow these links to understand how to register and attend with us. Here's our webinars, of course, and we do have a page where we chronicle these so that you can return to them, view them, the question and answer, and even this PowerPoint slide deck so that you can follow these links and kind of do a self-tour of the presentation yourself. All right, so now we're into our content for today. And after a few slides, I'll stop and ask if anybody has any questions. But for now, let's get started with the IRB. So prior to application, and again, you can do this at any point in your program, complete your city training. City training is typically good for 3 years. Review our institutional policies. We want you to understand some components about actually doing research, and sometimes the things that people learn when they think about the feasibility of research are a little different than the academic components of research, a little reality check. So you want to make sure that you are able to do the research that you're planning before you get too far down the road. So in some ways, it's good to come and visit our IRB resources so that you can be thinking about them concurrently with the other components that you must align as you do a full research study. We have our services that I had mentioned before that include group writing sessions, group session on the application, office hours, and we ask that you utilize those as needed. And then when we're ready to get going, we have some information for you about how to use our application system, Cayuse. So these are our getting started with IRB steps, and this will be the one time I bounce away from my presentation. It is a little awkward to bounce to the website, but here is our website, and here is our getting started page. We have our steps with links to specific information about each of those 5 steps that I just went through. So there is more to read and understand about those steps. Please do explore this. Note that we have some infographics that can be helpful for people who appreciate information in that format. The Quick Start Guide is a very useful tool that we will discuss in a bit of detail here in this presentation. So the main things that need to be completed before you can apply, because we have those suggestions, we have a couple of requirements. You have to have city certification. We want you to explore our resources. We even want you to go to our group writing sessions. But there are 2 things that are absolutely required for you to apply to the IRB. The first being for all primary investigators, for all PIs, that you have your documents and materials, your supplemental documents and materials prepared so that you can fully complete your application. And we have those group services that can help you with that. The other thing for dissertation students is that you have committee approval of your proposal. Depending on your program, that's either a dissertation proposal or a doctoral proposal. And we also see applications from non-dissertation students who would need an NU-affiliated sponsor to act as their chair-like person on the study to oversee the study and be part of your application. If you have these 2 things, you can apply to us. And sometimes that confuses folks because they think that they need to be in a certain course or at a certain point in their program to come talk to us, come utilize our resources. And that is a little different than the criteria that we have for, sorry about that, the criteria that we have for actually applying to us. So an approved dissertation proposal, supplemental materials already constructed, that is who we typically see as doctoral students needing. And I have another slide here. We'll stop for questions in a second. These are the main ingredients of starting your application. We have web pages about submitting to the IRB with quick start guides, and we have how-to videos. So again, I'm not going to bounce to the websites, but I do have screenshots. So our submit to IRB page, which is linked here, so you can very easily find it. And you can see here that it's highlighted, and this is the content from that page. Has both a subpage about specific instructions about how to apply, as well as quick start guides that will show you the very few directions that you need to follow in order to get into the Cayuse application system. So I don't want to get into the details too much about that. These are pretty well constructed documents, and you should be able to follow directions for the type of person that you are. Now you'll see here that we have language that you may not recognize, legacy NU and legacy NCU. Think about it this way. The transition happened not that long ago. If you have an NU email address, you'll use this one. If you have an NCU email address, you'll use this one. It's as simple as that. There are two different ways in, and we need to negotiate that as PIs. So make sure you're looking at the right one. If it doesn't work for you, you might have the wrong one. So try the other one. But these are helping you just access the system. It's a couple of clicks to get into our Cayuse system. We also have on our help materials page, which is screenshotted here and linked, the selection of our videos that most relate to beginning your application. So I've highlighted them here with this arrow. They are how to log in to Cayuse and begin your application, and how to complete your application. So if you watch those two videos, you'll have a very good idea about how to work through the Cayuse application system. We have other videos, as you can see, the list goes on for specific components of the application system. These are embedded in the application, and you can watch them as you go. So some good information here about how to begin your application. And before we move on to that next slide, let me pause for a second. I'll ask Kelly if we have any questions that might be relevant at this point.
I think we're keeping up with them. Dr. Munch is answering one in the Q&A area, and then I think I'm keeping up with the ones on our chat timeline. So I think we're okay.
Continue on, and thanks, and continue to ask any questions that you have. All right, so applying then. Now, once you're in the Cayuse system, once you've kind of started the study, and again, we have a lot of help documents and videos for how to do that. I just want to give you some specifics, kind of about applying in our system. So don't forget those quick start guides, utilize our help materials, and then create all of your supplemental documents or materials. We're going to show you some sample application views within Cayuse so that you can have some orientation to what it'll look like and what some expectations are for you as you enter that system and complete your application. I don't believe I have it listed here, but I do want to note that you can enter that system over and over, save your work, go back to it, complete certain pages and not others, and it can be a project that takes some time to do. It doesn't time out. It won't delete what you're working on within 30 days or anything like that. It perpetually stays in the system. So you can construct a seemingly rather large application over time. Depending on the type of study, you may have several pages. Others have a few less, a few more, depends on what you're doing. So please see that as a working kind of platform that you could answer 10 minutes worth of questions and then come back at a separate time. So the sample application views I'm about to show you constitute the application pages. And on those pages, we have places for written comments and kind of narrative answers. What is your process for recruiting? Something like that, where you would describe it to us. But we also have check marks and radio buttons to choose certain components out of all the myriad that are available for researchers. So make sure that as you go through your application, you're answering fully for your type of study. There's many types of research studies, and the Cayuse application system can handle most, if not all of them. But we do need you to make sure you're choosing the right components and answering the questions correctly. There's also certain pages where you will upload those supplemental documents that we have discussed. And those are, I believe I had a slide about this here in upcoming, things like recruitment emails, your consent letter, a permission form. The elements that we have group writing sessions about, where you can go and learn how to do these. We have a web page where you can find templates. And then once all of your pages are complete, the option to submit your application opens. So you might be waiting for a permission form to come in. Everything else is complete except for that. Once you receive that permission form, you can complete your application. Once you do so, you'll see a new option open up at the bottom that allows you to complete. So this helps us and you from submitting an incomplete application. So let's take a look at a couple of these Cayuse views, and then we'll stop and see if anybody has any questions about what we're looking at. I've screenshotted from Cayuse, and you can see it's the similar colors to what we use here at NU. And this is what a page looks like. It's typically a series of questions. On this page, you can see that you're being asked to attest to certain things, and you have links to optional resources. You can even see on the left-hand side a typical list of pages that an application might have for you to complete. We want to know the objectives of your study, the design of your study. Maybe you're working with adults, which is our most common type of study. But we also have pages for minors and some other scenarios as well. So as you choose the answers on the first few pages, the rest of the application opens up in an appropriate way for your study. For this particular study, we have information about costs and incentives, informed consent, risks and benefits, and you can see some of the other categories that might appear. On this view, you see some of the similar things, but you can also see now that there's a page where you have to make choices, not just to test all the things there, but tell us exactly what you're doing. So on this page that is representative of recruitment, we can learn just what your study contains. And then you upload the appropriate supplemental documents and materials for what your study looks like. If you're just going to be using a flyer, then you wouldn't upload an email, you would upload a flyer. So matching your materials and documents with what you're telling us that you're doing is obviously the correct way to complete your application. Next view shows a little bit about what you might be asked to do and some of the resources that are linked. So this link here is to our consent page, where you can learn all kinds of information about consent. Here you can link to our group writing session page. And just under this question, in 2 to 3 sentences, you're going to need to describe your consent process. So thinking about not just what you wrote for your research proposal, your dissertation proposal, your summary that you might be writing if you're a faculty member or an administrator staff, but also thinking about how you're going to go about engaging your human subjects in research. We're going to need to know some narrative answers as to what it is that you're doing so that we can engage in our job, which is to protect human subjects from risk. Lots of detail in the application. Please do come to our IRB application group session that's held weekly for deeper detail about what the actual application looks like and how to navigate it. So we have the next topic, which is after the application. So it seems like a natural place to stop and ask if there are any outstanding questions at this point.
I think we've answered everything submitted so far.
Great. Folks are fast typers today. This is making my job easy.
Regina just put one in. She said she has questions on completing initial documents before actually applying, recruitment consent, etc.
Sure, yeah. So what we're expecting when you apply is that you have all of your supplemental materials created, drafted, finally drafted, so that they're ready to go. We expect to see the recruitment email or the recruitment flyer or the consent letter or the instrument, right? So maybe your questionnaire or your interview protocol that you will then show your potential participant or your participant, depending on the material. So we need to see the exact thing, the very last draft of the material that will be used in your study. So when you do apply, it is a moment where you should have everything set, and the resources that are available on our through our website, including the written materials, the help videos, and the services where you can go and have someone look at your materials, talk to you about them, and learn a little bit about through a presentation. Those should all happen prior to application if needed. The group sessions are not required programmatically for any of them. So you could submit your application simply from following written directions on our website. And sometimes we have people who do that and complete their application just fine. Most people like to come and engage in our interactive resources of group sessions and office hours. And to answer the question specifically for materials, it's the group writing sessions that you would register for, submit your document to, and then during that small group session, receive feedback on. We've had people come to sessions for recruitment multiple times, and Kelly and I have reviewed multiple drafts of people's recruitment materials during those sessions just to make sure that they are correct. And we do have people using them all. We have people using them in their own ways, and we have some people who don't need them at all for moving through the application process. So I think you said that was Regina's question. So Regina, that is something, yes, should be completed before application, but we have a lot of resources available to you. So please follow up if you have any other questions. And Kelly, anything else from the chat?
I think we're okay. There's a few popped up. Is there any funding available to go to conferences or learn more about my topic? So we don't offer any funding. And then Elaine's asking questions about her specific instrument. It's a questionnaire prepared on Qualtrics. Will you require the link or a copy of the questionnaire?
Yeah, I think that's a good relevant question. As far as the funding goes, the IRB does not offer funding. And so I would say probably, discuss that with more programmatic personnel, your chair, possibly your dean of students, maybe even your academic advisor might be able to help in that regard. For the component, I'm sorry, the second thing, Kelly, remind me what that was. I'm sorry, I lost track of the
questionnaires that are online. Should you attach the online version or a paper-based?
Yes, and so exactly like the recruitment email or recruitment flyer or informed consent letter that we're going to see, we would also need to see the final draft of your instrument. And sometimes that means that you supply it as a PDF or a Word file. Sometimes that means you link us to it directly in Qualtrics so that we can see it. I think our application allows for that flexibility. We trust that the instrument you show us in a PDF is the instrument that's going to end up on Qualtrics. but we do not, I believe, require the live link to your survey or questionnaire hosted on Qualtrics in your application. You can certainly provide it to us and we'll look at it, but we just need to see the instrument so that we know what types of questions you're asking people, right? That's one of the areas of risk for our human subjects, is what topics that they will be asked to discuss. And we want to make sure we know, and we want to make sure that the potential participants know what's coming.
Chad, I have a
I was
question.
going to say, any additions from our director, Bree?
I answered a couple questions in the Q&A section about the difference between faculty research and student research and the process that we follow. And it is the same process for both students, and I know, Chad, you'll get to this in a little bit, for both students and faculty. So I just wanted to point out that we have a mix of folks in the room, and everything that Chad's pointing us to here is applicable to anyone doing research at the university.
Yep, great. We know, and we're happy and feel lucky that we have multiple stakeholders doing research at the university. And if you do ever have any questions about if this applies to my class of employee, please do ask, put it in the chat, and we'll definitely follow up. So yeah, how are we doing, Kelly? Can we move forward at this point? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna continue to answer questions. Regina's got one about recruitment, the process, but I think I can answer it here.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So after application, then, this is once you have submitted. Okay, you've completed your application, you have all of your pages completed, you've been given the option to submit. You click that button and off it goes. It's no longer in your hands. And the first step is that it goes to your faculty chair. Now, we have some help materials. Don't want to get too deep into the weeds. You will attach your chair to your application. So they are linked, and then they will see it. If you are a researcher that is not a student, this step does not apply to you. So if you're a staff or a faculty member or an administrator, you will not obviously have a faculty chair that needs to review it. For dissertation students, this would be your faculty chair. For non-dissertation students, this would be your faculty sponsor, a NU affiliated individual who is able to lead your research. So just since many of our applicants are dissertation students, we'll pause for a second here. This is where your chair essentially acknowledges that this is the right student, this is the right study, and from the best of their knowledge, this is a complete application. The chair is not an IRB professional, so we do not expect them to do full reviews, but sometimes they catch kind of absences of material or misstatements. So you may have a chair who sends it back to you, and you may have to revise and resubmit, in which case that chair then would, or sponsor would, see it again. So this loop hopefully doesn't take too long, but once you're through it, then the chair submits to us. So once that chair or sponsor agrees, it heads to our IRB pre-review, which is in some ways to protect you from wasting time in the process. If you submit an application and it has some pretty glaring missing elements, we're going to send it right back to you. We're not going to spend a week with it and then send it back to you and say, look, you don't have a complete application. We do this pre-review to make sure there is a substantive, complete application that we can fully review. So you may have it sent back to you for revisions within a short period of time at this step to complete the application. Once the application is deemed complete, it is assigned for a review. This is the moment we're all waiting for. This is when an analyst decides if your study is approvable. Now, you may go a couple of rounds with that analyst, asking for revisions, inclusions, changes, and once you reach the point of approval by that analyst, then we really get moving. So from this point forward, backward, If there is any revisions at the IRB review, IRB pre-review level, the application does need to return and move through the steps. So if in pre-review or if in IRB review there are revisions required, your chair is going to get a chance to look at it and approve and submit for you. So we want to make sure when we're thinking about timelines and resubmissions that you're taking this all into consideration. I have another graphic I'll follow up with here that has actual times associated with each of these steps, but I want to show you them here first before we get into that. Now, if your revisions have been determined to be appropriate, it enters into this second last stage where an approval can be offered. And then a determination, a letter is sent. So these happen very quickly together. And let me show you the next slide so that you can get a sense of how this works and how long it takes. Here's our PI, our principal investigator. And if you're a student, again, to the chair. If you are not a student, then you would directly submit to IRB review and we would skip this step. Again, you may go back and forth with the reviewer or the chair at this point. Once the application is determined to be complete, it heads for formal review where you may have to go back and forth with that formal reviewer in order to have a fully approvable application. Once that point is reached, a determination is made and a notification is provided. You can see that's through your university email, and we hope that it makes you happy when you get that. Some glimpse of the typical kind of email that you would receive. You've been approved. You're given some guidelines and some text to follow. It's typically at this moment that you can begin your recruitment. So this is a key moment in the life of a research study. Once you have our approval, you can set your plan in motion. Now, how long do each of these components take? For a chair, if that's your situation, it's typically 1 to 2 days. For pre-review, also 1 to 2 days. As I said, we're trying to save you time in this process by helping you see that your application is not complete at this point. If it is, it moves to full review, which can take 5 to 7 days. You can see our total is adding up on the bottom. We're at the 7 to 11 days. Determination and notification usually takes 1 day. So this would be the quickest that you would move through the IRB. If you did have multiple rounds at any of these points, you would then necessarily have more time in our process. Any questions at this point? I know the process and the timeline can be a little confusing to people. Kelly, how are we doing?
I think we are good. Yep, I'm addressing a question right now in the Q&A, and I think we are. We're so far, I think everybody's getting an answer. So it may not be the one they want, but we're trying.
I do think the question, Kelly, that you're addressing right now might be one that everybody might have, which is what would be a reason why you wouldn't be approved from the IRB?
Sure.
Chad,
So
you wanna go ahead?
there's a couple of different reasons. I've mentioned the word completeness. So in the pre-review stage or possibly even the chair stage, your chair may notice, but our pre-reviewer will, whether you're missing something. So if you say you're going to recruit through email and a flyer, but you only upload a flyer, we'll be asking for that email, right? If you say that you're working with adults and with minors, but we only have materials for the adults, you know, so completeness is common. Some people don't realize they don't have a complete application, not realizing that they need say a site permission form that's completed in order to gain access to resources to complete their study. So sometimes it's that. The Formal review can also include that, but less typically because our IRB reviewers have Hawkeye and usually catch those kinds of things. But at the formal review stage, sometimes it's about the correctness of the process. So you might have an answer or you might have uploaded a document, but that document is either incorrect or the process that you've described is not appropriate for protecting human subjects. So if you say I'm going to have the teacher of a classroom, pass out the recruitment materials to the students, we may see that as a conflict of interest, possibly coercive, and ask for a different kind of recruitment strategy for your study. Same as if you go through someone's boss to try to recruit them for a study, we would see that as potentially coercive and ask you to maybe change the process so that it is more voluntary. These are just two possibilities for why you may have to revise your application. I'll certainly pause. I think we have time if Kelly or Bree have any other really good examples of what might cause a revision and would like to share at this point.
I think you covered most of the things that we see, Chad.
Yeah.
It's typically about the completeness of the study and the materials that we're reviewing.
Yeah.
And that's not a disapproval. That's just a request for more information. And the IRB very rarely denies applications. So we work with you guys to make sure that we get all the content we need in order to get you through the process.
And we're not really discussing high-risk studies, anything that might need a full board review in this presentation, because they are so few and far between. Most social behavior and educational research, which is what we are very typically involved in at this institution, is generally low risk. There can be some sensitive questions. There can be some sensitive populations or protected populations that we'll need to consider. But some studies get pretty complicated when you want to research American Indian or Alaskan Native populations. There are more bits of information and more work that you have to do in order to engage those populations, and you just may not have provided us enough information or done enough legwork to work with that population yet to satisfy federal regulations. All right, so we'll continue to answer any questions as they come. Kelly, unless there's something pressing, I'll keep moving.
Yeah, no, real simple one. Somebody mentioned, do they need to get site approval before they submit the application? And I just wanted to say, yes, if you find you do need site approval, then yeah, you want to get that site permission. You'll need to get that permission together, that documentation, and submit it along with your application.
Yes, and this can become a little tricky sometimes depending on if the site also has an IRB. So if you have questions about that, you can certainly email the IRB, come to office hours to discuss those. Sometimes the site wants our kind of approval before they give theirs. So site permission, IRB approval from a site, there's kind of a gray area in there. Typically, if you're just looking for email addresses or you want access to a small resource, then some administrator of the institution typically can just provide a site permission. But yes, that would need to be included in order for our approval. We wouldn't want you approved and recruiting before we even knew it was okay to do that. So we would need to see those documents, absolutely. All right. So after IRB approval, then you've received your approval, you're off gathering data, and you may need, as you can see here in the teal, I've tried to correspond what happened up to this point in blue and what happens after this point in teal. So after IRB approval, you may need, note the asterisk, a modification to your study or to report an incident. Now, not everybody needs to do either of these. And in fact, we kind of hope that you don't have to. A modification would typically mean that your study's not going as planned and you needed to change something, maybe expand your recruitment, maybe you found that your instrument was not working well and you wanted to change that. So there are a couple of categories of changes, and any changes that would certainly impact, our kind of work with protecting human subjects, we would need to know about before you instituted it in your study. So we have in Cayuse, the platform, these options to add a modification to your study, to tell us what it is that you want to do, to show us what it is that you want to do, potentially with a new recruitment email. I think a common example that we give is you want to add incentive, a $25 gift card, because you're having trouble recruiting people. So in order to do that, you would have to change your recruitment material, and we would need to see that material and a short description of the change that you're making. A couple of other things require modifications, but many people work their way through the process without needing to modify their study. Incidents are even less common. Someone was to say be hurt or to have a psychological kind of event that needed intervention. We would want to know about that during the study. So incident reporting is another option within Cayuse, one that we hope that you don't have to utilize. But as you can see, that there is one step that everyone has to do, and that's to close your study. So no matter who you are, faculty, staff, students, when you're reached a certain point in your study, then we need to see that study closed in our system. This is a federal regulation, so we need to make sure that everybody does this. Now, what does it mean to close a study? Well, we have a page on our website that deals both with modifying and closing. So I have a screenshot here. You can see it's after IRB approval. So as we work our way through our menu items, we have a page specifically for this. These are subpages, so you can click on them, find directions for how to do it in Cayuse, what the expectation is for you to tell us during these modifications and closures. So please do take a look at those resources. And then when it comes time to close your study, these are the criteria. After you've recruited, be sure that you've completed these steps, that you've collected and de-identified all data, securely stored it according to the protocol that we have approved. And then for dissertation students, completed either, depending on your program, Chapter 4 or Section 3 with committee approval. So even more specifically for NCU legacy students, which I know do make up a lot of our students, that includes uploading the data collection verification form at closing. So within our system, you'll choose the I want to close my study option. When you've reached this point, the page opens up, asks for the reason that you're closing, which hopefully is I have completed the study, and not some of the other reasons, which we won't get into now. And then you're prompted to upload the data verification form. So that ensures that you are done with data collection, which is very important so that we don't have any complications moving forward should you not have enough data to complete your study. So by writing your Chapter 4 or Section 3 and having committee approval, that's essentially a guarantee that you have enough data. And we talk just specifically about the data collection verification form for a moment. For those of you that are dissertation students, NCU legacy dissertation students. This form can be found in the course, DIS 9903 or DIS 9913, depending on your program. And it is also available in the Dissertation Center and the Applied Doctoral Center. This is something that is a programmatic requirement and has worked its way into an IRB requirement. So you need to confer with your chair to make sure that that form is completed, signed by them, and that you have, in fact, enough data. You'll submit that form as part of your closure. So we need to make sure that you're getting chair feedback, getting chair kind of check mark on it by using the course room. So you'll see in that course room directions for where to find it, how to complete it, and how to submit it. Once you have chair okay, then you can close your study. The reason for that is because we cannot open your study. It's a hard stop. Once your study is closed and say you don't have enough data, you may have to start all over again in order to graduate. So that would be a horrible thing to happen. And this check and balance is in place to make sure that it doesn't. How are we doing on questions?
I think we are good.
I have a few, actually, I have a request from our chair to discuss in a little bit more depth the distinction between site permission for your site versus our specific site permission form for NU. And then what we accept as site permission, how we can receive that via an email. So go ahead, Chad.
Sure, yeah. So we do have 2 site permission forms on our website. And the first is a generic form that's typically used for external, right, kind of sites. And a site can be physical, but it can also be digital, right, online. So if you are trying to get email addresses from an organization, you essentially need site permission to get those email addresses. We need to know that an authorizing figure at that site is willing to give you those email addresses. And that site permission will serve as notification to us that that authorizing figure has agreed to do so. That could also be a physical space where you need to go and observe a classroom. We would need an authorizing figure, typically a building administrator, to provide a site permission that you can include in your application. Now, if you're doing research at NU, which is less common, there certainly was an institutional perspective that was, reach out to other places and do your research there. But we do, in special circumstances, allow you to research using NCU resources. And so we have a second site permission that you can submit to the provost's office, essentially, and get permission to utilize resources of NU for your research. There's a little bit higher of a threshold for that, since we don't want to inundate our own university with internal research. But we have seen them approved for relevant and important studies. So I think that is the difference then between the 2 site permissions. One would be for internal use, one would be for external use. Now, the internal one is a very specific form. And so if you are doing that type of research, that's what you would upload as the permission. For the external one, we do allow different kinds of communique to satisfy that site permission. So you could use our templated form and send it physically and have it signed by somebody. That's kind of the old school way of doing it. And most people would choose to email that to somebody or to amend the text in an email and receive an affirmative response through email. If you screenshotted that conversation and put it into a Word file, we would take that as site permission. If you did that through a messaging service, like on Facebook, because you wanted to post in a group, a closed group on Facebook, and you needed the moderator's permission, you could enter the abbreviated version as long as all of the important bits from our site permission template were in there into the messaging system, receive a reply back that said, yes, we'll do that for you. Screenshot that conversation, and that could serve as a site permission. We're not trying to be restrictive in site permission, but we do need to know that you have access legitimately to the resources that you're saying that you do. Now, we know that sometimes you can get email address lists from the organization you work for, but that doesn't mean that's legitimate, right? You need permission in order to utilize those for research. So just because you can access it doesn't mean that you should or will for your research. So there are a couple of different scenarios that require permission. And because of that, we want to make it easy for you to show us that you have it. those are the common ways: screenshotted conversations through email or text messaging or Facebook messaging, LinkedIn messaging, an email response chain, or an actual signed permission form if, say, it's your physical boss, a physical administrator, that you could do that and put it in their mailbox or something like that at work. So any of those would satisfy the requirement. Hopefully that answered the question. If you see a follow-up, let me know. All right. Just some important reminders. We do have those incredible group writing sessions that are generally led by Kelly. Very informative and a lot of good interaction with an IRB staff member who can answer questions, who can have short conversations with you. So it's not just ask one question, get one answer. You can kind of converse, have feedback given on your actual supplemental documents in eligibility, recruitment, and consent. And then we have an application session. There's nothing to submit for that. We don't review your application in that session. We just provide a informative presentation that goes deeper into the details of the application itself than what we've done here. And we have office hours. Just a reminder for all PIs, compile your supplemental materials. For dissertation student PIs, complete your dissertation proposal, your doctoral proposal, have it approved, and you are then eligible to apply. Please type any questions that you have if you can think of any here at the end, and they will be included in our written question and answer document that we will provide in a day or two. And of course, here's links again to our more important resources. Our email, you can email with questions at any time, and take a look at our website for all those resources. Any last questions from the chat before we go?
If you do have additional questions, we will provide them in the follow-up email. Until the next time, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thank you again to all of our IRB members and to all of our attendees. Have a good evening.